the national co-chair of the DSA, went on television and showed us exactly who she is and what her party believes. Abolish the U.S. Senate, the presidency as we know it, the Supreme Court as we know it? True. Abolish ICE? Absolutely. Open the borders? Defund the Pentagon? Empty the prisons? Have the government seize private companies? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All questions answered with complete conviction. And all those responses completely disqualifying for a party that likes to tell people they're really just about health care and tax reform. I have no problem with debate. Barack Obama might say that a party that stops debating the big issues with itself stops growing. But there's a difference between pushing your party to be better and asking it to abandon every single thing that makes it worth belonging to in 2026. Remember how the Democrats pushed back against the lawlessness of January 6th and the attempt to overthrow the election? How they rose up and fought back against Americans and immigrants being gunned down in American streets, and they did it to defend the basic American values and the Constitution. And as far as defense goes, JFK promised America would pay any price, bear any burden to assure the survival and the success of liberty. LBJ passed the most sweeping civil rights legislation in history. That's a party worth fighting for. Bill Clinton balanced the budget 4 years in a row. Nobody's done that in over 100 years. And Barack Obama, he created the Affordable Care Act and expanded health care coverage to record levels. You know, he added 20 million Americans to the insured rolls. And Joe Biden fought back against the corrupt anti-democracy forces that still infect Donald Trump's Republican Party. But being that party defends democracy, also demands condemning a party that calls to abolish the U.S. Senate, the House, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. Wants to release murderers and rapists from jail. I mean, one candidate was asked by the New York Times 3 times, do you support letting murderers out of jail? She wouldn't even answer. A party that zeroes out spending on defending America's borders, defending America overseas, defending America at home, takes police officers out of our children's schools and off our streets, and erases America's borders? Come on. Democrats have always believed you can love your country while pushing it toward being that more perfect union. And you can do that without wanting to burn it to the ground. If Democrats want to make America more affordable, more fair, and more free, and I think they do, they better speak truth to its most extreme base, or they're going to let a small faction of radicals drive more people toward Donald Trump. Because Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, every other Democrat in Washington, D.C., make no mistake of it, if you don't define your party today, Donald Trump will be sure to define it in November. And Jim Van Dyke, you've written about this. You talked about how Donald Trump took over the Republican Party in 6 steps. You're also looking at what the most radical elements of the DSA are doing to the Democratic Party. Talk about that.
Yeah, anyone who thinks that Democrats couldn't eventually nominate a socialist candidate is not paying attention to what's happening inside the Democratic Party. You have a base that is really fed up. They feel like the establishment loses elections and doesn't have a spine. They're looking for something new. Then you see what happens with the mayor in New York. You see what happens in House races in New York. You look what happens in Colorado. You look to my home state of Wisconsin, where Francesca Hong, who is a DSA endorsed, a DSA believer, is now the leading candidate to get the nomination for the Democratic Party in that state. Something is happening. These ideas, or at least some of those ideas, are starting to resonate with the base. More Democrats have a favorable impression of socialism than capitalism. Now, do I think most Democrats think the ideas that you just outlined and that the head of the DSA outlined are good ideas? I think most people think they're loony. Abolishing the police, setting free prisoners, getting rid of the Senate, that's nonsense. Most people would say that's not good policy. But there's a lot of those policies that do resonate, especially when you can camouflage them as affordability or as kind of our rage against the establishment machine. And this is very real. And you have to look at what happened to Republicans as an example. I was thinking this morning, Joe, when you came into Congress, right, it used to be a very establishment-dominated party. Then you had this Republican rebellion, followed by the Tea Party, and then followed by Donald Trump. And you basically had an entire takeover of a party that went from establishment to unthinkable, to what you would have said was unthinkable in 94, most would have said is unthinkable in 2004. The same thing could take place within the Democratic Party because they feel like they keep putting up losers. They feel like, I go with the establishment and I get Donald Trump twice. Why should I keep doing that? I'd much rather go with what makes me feel good and what animates me. And I do think there's a lot of Democrats who feel like the government should have a bigger hand in things. They do rightly feel like affordability is a massive problem for a lot of people. And they feel like the system as it's created right now isn't serving them. So these candidates are speaking to something that is resonating, and if it wasn't resonating, they wouldn't be winning. And if they win, it becomes contagious. If it becomes contagious, the establishment might hate these ideas, but they'll do what Republicans did, which is fall silent because they fear they'll get decapitated politically. And that's what we're trying to get at in this column today. I'm not saying we're there. I'm saying there are definitely signs, and anybody who's not paying attention to them is not paying attention to American politics.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree with you. And Jonathan Lemire, let's be very clear here. Because I don't want to hear any bullshit about, Joe's against affordable health care. No, I'm for that. I'm for affordable health care. In fact, our health care system is so broken, we're going to have to go back and actually fix Obamacare because Republicans have been breaking it over the past couple of years. And that's going to move more toward a universal health care system. I also know that the establishment in Washington, D.C., the Democrats and the Republicans don't work. Also agree that billionaires need to be taxed. I mean, these are things that most Americans agree on. We need tax fairness. At the same time, when the DSA co-chair says our party supports abolishing the Senate, getting rid of the Supreme Court, getting rid of the president, getting rid of jails, getting rid of the Pentagon, defunding all of these things, I think that requires that you ask the Michigan Senate candidate if he agrees with those policies. I think that requires you asking the mayor of New York City whether he agrees with all of those policies. I think that requires that you ask any political candidate that is running, do you agree with those policies? Why? Because, they're going, that's not fair. They sound just like Republicans if they say that. When you ask them about, hey, Donald Trump said this today, what do you think about it? So it's just accountability. Let us know if you really are about affordable health care. If you really are about affordable housing, if you really are about lifting up the working class and making millionaires and billionaires and multinational corporations finally pay their fair share, tell us that and condemn all that other craziness, because it is craziness. That's what I want to see reporters start asking these candidates today. And if they're smart, they'll run as far away from that lunacy as possible. If they refuse to answer it, that's a bad sign for them. That's a bad sign for their campaign. And that's a bad sign for the Democratic Party if they don't speak truth to power.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. If mainstream Republicans, and there aren't too many of those left, but if they're asked about some of the sort of more extreme ideas held by Donald Trump or his allies, then yes, then Democrats, that shame test should be applied to Democrats. And to be clear, I agree with what Jim Vandehei said. The vast majority of Democrats would not agree with almost any of that stuff that the DSA leader there put out in that interview. In fact, believing even one of those positions probably would be disqualifying in just about every part of the country. There's only a few exceptions there, and we have seen some wins. And Mark McKinnon, you are, of course, a veteran political strategist. Though these views are not widely held, but they are reflective of something. They're reflective of an energy that's in the Democratic Party right now. It is on the left. It's progressivism. So if you were, to what Joe just said, if you were advising one of these candidates who was going to be put, on the spot by a reporter being asked about these positions, how would you handle it?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, I'd say that this is so typical of Democrats. When the wind is at their back, when they have every issue in the country that voters really care about, the economy, inflation, the war in Iran, the Democrats are winning. But what do Democrats do when they have the wind at their back? Turn around the boat and go right into the head with something crazy like this. I never thought I'd hear the word defund police again after what happened politically the last time to Democrats because of that. So what I would say is that acknowledge that there's an energy, and that energy is really about just being mad about the incumbency of Democrats and the failure to fight the system, fight the corruption, and stand up. So I think this platform, as you've acknowledged, that's not something that 95% of Democrats agree with any of that. But it's just reflective of an energy and an anger that was very much like MAGA at the beginning. So just acknowledge that anger and fuel it in the right direction, but slap them down when you have the opportunity to do it.
And Mika, the other part of this, of course, is that even if there actually are not many Democrats who believe this, it's a gift to Republicans. Talking like that allows Republicans to label the entire party, the GOP, on their heels right now. And this is a life preserver they can hang on to and then turn it into a cudgel.